In 2016, a landmark study showed that 12.5% of lawyers reported having ADHD, compared to 4 to 8% of adults generally. And that's just the lawyers who know that they have ADHD. In this video, I'm going to share my experience of navigating the legal profession with undiagnosed ADHD and what I've learned since my diagnosis that may be helpful to other lawyers who may have ADHD, and especially to those neurotypical lawyers who work with them so they can have an understanding of what they're going through. Welcome back! And if you're new to this channel, I'm Annie Little. I'm an ICF certified coach and a former lawyer. I created this channel for lawyers who are looking for practical guidance on how to land, lead, and succeed in the legal profession and beyond. If you had told me that I would have been diagnosed with ADHD at any point in my life, let alone at the age of 40, I never would have believed it. As a millennial growing up in the 90s, I had heard that ADHD was mostly hyperactive kids, primarily boys, who couldn't focus, got bad grades, and needed medication that turned them into zombies in order to focus because their parents had done a horrible job of raising them. And that misunderstanding of what ADHD looks like did not jive with what my personal history looks like. I was a high school valedictorian. I double majored with honors at a top 10 university. I graduated from a top 20 law school, cum laude, and had my student note published on the Law Review. But as it turns out, I have a textbook case of combined ADHD. And considering that I didn't understand ADHD despite having it, I want to share with other lawyers what I've learned about this neurodevelopmental brain disorder, especially since lawyers experience ADHD at almost 3 times the rate of the general population. But before we get into the obstacles that come with being a lawyer who has ADHD, I want to first address why lawyers with ADHD are so good at their jobs. High achievers with ADHD are drawn to the legal profession because we thrive under pressure. So when any human is stressed, whether they have ADHD or not, the brain releases cortisol and adrenaline and all these stress hormones that allow us to focus on only what is essential, to complete these super necessary tasks, and to exclude everything else. Now, this surge in these neurotransmitters allow people with ADHD to complete tasks that under other conditions, less stressful conditions, would be virtually impossible for them to complete. So what we with ADHD learn is that we thrive under chaotic, pressurized deadlines. So you might be wondering, well, then how is it possible for lawyers who have to work under stress and can't get anything done otherwise? How are they able to even get anything done in these, compressed timelines? Here's your answer: hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is one symptom of ADHD that can be very, very useful. And this is because it allows us to learn or complete really complex tasks in a very shortened period of time. This is why people with ADHD actually are able to cram for exams, and that might be the only way they can study, and how they're also able to complete projects on a really shortened timeline. So here's what I would like for neurotypical lawyers to understand about their ADHD colleagues. ADHD is a genetic, neurodevelopmental brain disorder characterized by lower levels of dopamine than neurotypical brains. So along with other related neurotransmitters, dopamine is responsible for regulating focus, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. So when dopamine and its related neurotransmitters are out of balance, this can manifest in behaviors that are easily corrected in people with a neurotypical brain, but they are really challenging to correct in someone who has a neurodivergent brain. And this is why it's so important to understand what's going on in the brain of someone with ADHD when certain behaviors are showing up in the workplace. I just need to add a caveat here. These symptoms that I'm about to explain are things that every human experiences at some point. But with people who have ADHD, these are chronic, pervasive struggles. They are symptoms of our neurodevelopmental brain disorder that we struggle with regularly. All right, so one of the really big ones that most people are familiar with is procrastination. People with ADHD have what's called an interest-based nervous system. What this means is that if we don't have an intrinsic interest in completing a task, our brain cannot produce the requisite amounts of dopamine to get us to complete that task. And this is true even if we really, really, really want to complete the task. How confusing is that for everyone involved? And so another phrase that I find is actually a better description of this is that this lack of dopamine makes it really difficult for us to initiate tasks. So task initiation is really what's at the heart of this. Even if we really, really want to start it, it feels like we physically can't get it going without the dopamine. All right, another phenomenon that I see a lot in my clients with ADHD and that happened with me is low billables despite regular deliverables. And we can attribute this phenomenon to hyperfocus because what happens is, as you know, it can be difficult for us to initiate a task if it's not something we're genuinely interested in. And so what happens is we get very stressed. Once the stress kicks in and we see that we're up against a deadline, the stress hormones start flowing. That gives us the motivation we need to initiate the task. And then we trigger our hyperfocus and boom, we crank it out. Because remember, in hyperfocus, people with ADHD are able to learn or complete really complex tasks in a very compressed timeline. So you're still getting a quality end product, but it's not taking as much time as it would take a neurotypical brain. Another very common behavior of people with ADHD is being chronically late. This is due to an ADHD symptom known as time blindness. And this is an inability for ADHD brains to perceive the passing of time, which, as you might imagine, has a really horrible impact on virtually every aspect of our lives. And really what's going on is we have a hard time estimating how long tasks will take or how long it'll take us to go somewhere. So it's really like the preparing to leave to go somewhere. We think we have enough time, but we're actually really terrible at estimating how much time it takes for us to complete things. And so we end up being late. But really what you need to know about this is that time blindness is a true symptom of ADHD, and it has nothing to do with someone like me disrespecting your time or disregarding other people's schedules. All right, this one was a big one for me. Forgetting details from meetings or verbal work assignments. Low levels of dopamine impact working memory. And what this would look like for me is somebody could give me verbal instructions on something to complete. And there was a 50-50 chance that if they asked me just 5 minutes later to repeat back what they had told me, I wouldn't be able to do it. And it's not because I wasn't listening. Additionally, some people with ADHD, like myself, also have auditory processing disorders. And so what can happen is if I'm involved in a task and somebody starts talking to me before I need time, my brain needs time to switch from the task I'm working on in order to pay attention to what they're saying. So I might hear everything they've said except the first 5 seconds. And so I'll need them to repeat it. But I don't want them, everyone thinks I'm not listening, but really I did not hear the first part of what you said. And this last behavior that I'm going to cover today is one that really affected my mental health in a severe way when I was practicing law. And this was making careless or seemingly sloppy mistakes. So again, the ADHD brain is dealing with these lower levels of dopamine and the associated neurotransmitters that we need to focus on a singular task. And we don't have control over the stimuli that our brain is processing. So it's not that we don't have attention, it's actually that we have a lot of attention and our brains are processing a lot of external stimuli at once. So if there's not enough external stimuli, we're bored. If there's too much, we're overwhelmed. Yes, it's very idiosyncratic and annoying for everyone involved. But with our brains buzzing constantly with all of these competing thoughts and ideas, it can be really challenging for us to only focus on one thing. And so we can overlook seemingly simple details, and it can look like we just are being careless and that we're just not paying attention the way we should. That couldn't be further from the truth, though. And please also know that people with ADHD are extremely hard on themselves. You think lawyers are already hard on themselves? Multiply that by 10. So if you have a lawyer that you work with who you suspect might have ADHD or who you know has ADHD, please have some compassion for them, because odds are they have precious little for themselves. And one of the best ways that you can show compassion for the ADHD people in your life is to understand that there is no simple solution to their behaviors. So saying things like, just try to focus, or just really work on trying to be early. We're really trying. That is not helpful. And all you're going to do is you're going to contribute to our already soaring levels of self-loathing. So please, I know it's going to take you a while to get there, but please just understand, if it were that simple, we'd have it under control. So I have included a bunch of links to resources about ADHD in the description, because I am in no way an expert, and I have gotten all this information from lots of reputable sources, but I do encourage you to check some of them out so you can learn more about this very complex neurodevelopmental brain disorder that's very, very common in the legal profession. I also want us to keep in mind that while ADHD lawyers are navigating all of what we've already discussed, they're also navigating a legal profession that is designed to push virtually every lawyer at some point into a state of burnout. I would argue that lawyers with ADHD get pushed to the brink of burnout much faster and in a much more severe fashion than neurotypical lawyers, but that is an unofficial hypothesis. Nevertheless, if you are wondering what burnout looked like, if you might be suffering from burnout, check out my free guide, Break Free from Lawyer Burnout. There's a link in the description, and I hope it's enlightening for you.